I find it strangely comforting when the manager confirms the very same issues that seemed so apparent in watching that game. Now, if you judge things based on social media, you'd think you'd watched an entirely different game because it's never as bad as it seems, just like it's never as good. And so a lot to cover here as our undefeated start to 2025 comes to an end. Drinking coffee because it's a morning record and presented by 24/7 Services. Let's review Monaco 1, Villa 0. Before I get into the Monaco game, a great question came out of the Arsenal show asking why I didn't award a VAR decision plus in favor of Aston Villa because of the chalked off Havertz goal. And in both of the production feeds that I follow, the Premier League Productions broadcast I watched live with John Champion and Andy Townsend, and then the Villa TV crew of Mark Reagan and Ian Taylor, both said immediately when the ball went in the net that there was some question as to whether the referee had awarded a goal. Now, I wasn't there, so I couldn't see him pointing to midfield, so I have to base my opinions on those two crews. The PGMOL Twitter feed said a goal was awarded on field. So until I hear those words, the ruling on the field is goal, I'm going to leave it as it is. We might have to wait till the mic'd up show with Howard Webb. It behooves a referee to make a decision when he thinks something's wrong because they're human. Nobody wants to be overruled by somebody in Stockley Park. Also, on the Trossard late chance, he puts it wide as the flag goes up for offside. Now, I thought officials were supposed to keep their flags down in situations where it's tight because if that had gone in, I'm not so sure that that flag wouldn't have been overruled because the laser lines, from my viewpoint anyway, would have been needed to determine this one. Since we last spoke, it does appear now like Diego Carlos is off to Turkey, and many are wondering why are we leaving ourselves with no center back cover for a transfer fee of 8 million quid. It's not really about the transfer fee. It's about wiping 100 grand a week off the books, which for us translates to just a little bit over 7 million, and that gives us the flexibility to go after a player who's probably better and, of course, younger than Carlos in Loic Bade. Problem is that Sevilla seems to be playing hardball over their prized asset. If you want your guy, you go get your guy, but I am surprised that Monchi is even trying to do business with his old club Sevilla, given how it ended for them, and I'm surprised he wants to do it with his replacement Victor Orta, who knows that Bade is their biggest asset right now, and even though they need to probably do business because of their financial situation, they don't want to get fleeced, especially by the guy who made a reputation at Sevilla of fleecing other teams. And the problem with this dragging on is that we are just one injury away from big trouble. And that thought crossed my mind as Ezri Konsa was lying on the floor with physios around him, pulling his shirt over his head. As for Carlos, the player and the person himself, it just never worked out here. Obviously, a ruptured Achilles in your first ever home game is not going to help, but after he recovered, it just didn't feel like he had the same affinity for Aston Villa as he did for Sevilla. One goal during his time here, a couple of very good games against Arsenal and Bayern Munich, but if you believe David Ornstein, there was also clearly tension between Carlos and Unai Emery, and therefore we have to move on. The implications of not finishing top 8 could be stark because we might be playing 6 games in 16 days come February, and that may derail all of the competitions we're still in at the moment. You could look back on this Monaco game. Obviously, you could look back at Brugge away. But maybe most of all, you could look back at that refereeing decision at the end of the Juventus game that cost us a critical 2 extra points. Maybe this is why Unai Emery looked so frustrated after this game, talking about players not sticking to the plan. Who was he talking about there, I wonder? And how about this exchange?
Can you give an example of what you mean, what you saw? Can you elaborate on that? So you mean you don't think the mentality is strong enough?
We want it, and we need it.
Any kind of result on Tuesday would have been beneficial heading into Matchweek 8 with Celtic, but we did get a lot of incredible results going in our favor, not the least of which was Barcelona coming from 4-2 down at Benfica in the driving rain of Lisbon to win 5-4 in extraordinary fashion. And then Samuel Illing Jr., Agent Samuel, one of 2 goals Bologna scored within 2 minutes of each other to beat Dortmund, which kept Villa in 8th at the moment. Here is the updated table after all of Wednesday's results heading into the final match day. I've been thinking about the away support of our club a lot recently, wondering, could I do it? Could I follow this team around to away venues, whether in Europe or in the league? And that's based on discussions with guys like Paul White and Samir, who was in the Principality wearing this very handsome Henson track top. But you think about it, like, traveling is irritating. Not the getting there part. The getting there part is great. The process of travel is very annoying and expensive, and you have to take time off of work. It's a big commitment. But I do wonder if those that travel actually feel like this is a job. Showing up physically and having the presence there. Showing up vocally, supporting the team and reminding them that they are paying good money to be there and try to give them a lift and an edge in the process. Obviously not cheap to travel, especially in Monaco, but this Champions League campaign has provided some amazing away visits, and this one has to be right up there. The land of the rich and famous on the French Riviera, where everything looks expensive, and Samir capturing all of it. Our senior correspondent was doing some shopping, pricing out luxury cars and yachts, and then reveling with supporters, which included Ian Taylor, a man of the people. It all looked so amazing as I attempt to sort out the 3 key issues or moments that defined Monaco 1, Villa 0. Is it just me, or does Stade Louis Daire look like it might have been designed and built by a Bond villain? You know, very odd, but still somehow intriguing stadium. I was a bit surprised to see the hosts have an edge in XG, shot attempts. Villa had a good ratio of shots per shots on target, way more possession as the away team, and were overall tidier in completing passes, but not passes over 20 yards, which was an Achilles heel because we were looking for those direct bombs to our forwards. A big theme of this game was Villa's inability to complete some crucial passes in the middle and final thirds as well. Passes that would have completely opened up the game. Collectively, we covered an average of almost 11 kilometers, which was slightly more than the hosts, and leading the way was Yuri Tielemans, who covered 11.47 kilometers. I was also surprised that we only made 3 changes, Dean, Buendia, and Bailey, given that we had 1 day less rest than Monaco, who made 5 changes from the team that lost on the previous Friday night. And that may have showed in minutes 70 to 90, because Unai Emery said everything was going to plan for 70 minutes, then we lost control of the game. Part of that was trying to play Duran and Watkins together, but the boss, I think, needs to take some responsibility for not pulling the trigger on the Ramsey for Rodgers substitution, because Rodgers was having a putrid time trying to retain the football in the late stages of that second half. The statistical measurements that would back up my eyeballs include passing accuracy, just 70% overall in the game. That's really low. He completed 2 of 7 dribbling attempts. 2 was the highest of any player in the game, but he attempted 7, and then ground duels won 42%, or 5 of 12. We really need Daniel Malen in this team now. Obviously, he was cup tied for the league phase of this competition. And what's interesting about Malen, despite all that's been written about him, his record when he's in the team at Borussia Dortmund versus when he's not, hugely different. He made an impact in that team whether he was providing goals or not. The 24/7 services crew was as frustrated as everybody else with that game. I'm sure that if they had some demolition work the next day, whoa, they could have done some serious damage with a sledgehammer. In fact, that's a really good idea. Renovate your kitchen, renovate your bathroom, put on the Monaco game in the background and watch how fast the dust will fly. Now, recently, the team in green was in Shipley at one of their regular client's funeral care up on the roof dealing with some coping stones. Most people can't even see this work from outside the building down on the street, but just because you can't see the attention to detail and ensuring that everything is buttoned up all neat and tidy, like, well, that doesn't matter. This is where being fussy and militant about quality is built into the 24/7 service's DNA. If you need work done on your roof, this is 24/7's jam. Start with a fair quote. Visit the numbers that I've included in the description of this video or go to the company's website. You'll find them there as well. Emi Buendia had some encouraging moments in that game connecting with teammates. It was his first start since at Wickham, so you have to cut him some slack. But then we also saw examples of the biggest issue that's plagued him since he's joined us, the inability to connect a pass at a crucial moment that could unlock an opposition. 78% passing completion percentage, not bad, but only 4 of 11 on ground duels. And this is the problem. A less physically imposing player playing in congested areas has to be able to find those spaces and make those passes instinctively. I would not be surprised if Emi Buendia did depart this window, and recently River Plate, a magnificent club in his homeland, was linked. Big issue number 3, road rage. Winning in Europe away is hard. When you think back to the last 2 years of European competition, we've played 8 games away from Villa Park. We've won 3 of them. Last year at Alkmaar, this year at Young Boys, and at Leipzig. And that's actually pretty decent. A couple of draws came in handy during the group stage of the Conference League last year, and they would have come in real handy this year as well, say at Brugge or at Monaco, for instance. But we're not the only ones that struggle away from home in European competition. Villa Park has been a fortress. Only one team has come and won there, and that was Olympiacos. It's not exclusively a European problem for Aston Villa either. We just haven't looked as good away from home. So either we have to start improving how we play away from Villa Park, or we have to win every single game at Villa Park, and that simply is not realistic. And it's not like this club spares expense in its travels. I mean, they do everything to try to make the players comfortable, but it is odd how different we look away from home. And if we want to consistently progress year upon year, that has to change. Yes! Yeah! Big issue number 2, Watkins withstood. I'm speaking, of course, of the glorious chance in first half stoppage time, one of very few open, clear-cut opportunities, which is a reflection to some degree of how well Monaco stifled us. They did not allow us to accelerate through the neutral part of the field. They compressed the game this way and this way. I mean, think about how many times we had possession in and around the box, totally congested everywhere. The only way we were going to get a shot on target was with some kind of intricate one-on-one battle or a perfectly timed run in concert with a seeing eye pass. So when Emi Buendia beautifully found Ollie Watkins with a little reverse pass in first half stoppage time, I think we all expected the ball to hit the back of the net, which would have been a perfect time to score right before the interval. And you could hear Villa fans everywhere saying he should have scored and Duran would have scored. To be fair, it was a great save by the goalkeeper, even though it kind of looked like he was guessing. I mean, it was as if he was leaning to his right, Watkins left, which is why he got a great jump on the shot. I try not to let this bug me, but everybody loves to say, why didn't he just slot it on the right-hand side of the goal? Because it looked like there was more space to do that, and 99.9% of the people who were saying that have never kicked a ball in anger, and if they were put in that exact same situation, they would stumble over and fall on their face, let alone bury it. Still, though, this is the conundrum over our Ollie. He makes difficult situations look easy sometimes, and easy situations look difficult. He's also 6 goals away from eclipsing Gabby, which is incredible for our club in such a short period of time. But these are the moments that are going to keep him up at night wondering what if. And I always say it's harder to actually manufacture the big chance, knowing exactly when to make the run, staying on side, and then telepathically combining with your teammate, in this case Buendia. Finishing is either instinctive or it is a process that you have to work on day in and day out. And this is Watkins' issue. He is not an instinctual finisher. That brings us to another big issue, trying to play our two nines together at the same time. And Unai Emery made quite a point in every single one of his post-match interviews of saying it did not work. We were a different team when we had Ollie Watkins and John Duran playing together, so much so that it felt like he was almost saying, see, this does not work when we play these two together. It's going to have to be one or the other. And my gut tells me also that one of the people he might have been irritated with after the game in terms of this was John Duran. I could not tell how they were meant to fit together. And when Duran came on, he sort of gave an instruction to Watkins, but it kind of looked like, we'll just do whatever. And even though we had two big targets up front, we couldn't win aerial duels, we couldn't maintain possession, and we stopped creating big chances. And Duran also had a couple of rash moments where maybe he just should have calmed down in the moment. The over-the-head kick, trying to draw a penalty. And by the way, for those who said that he did not know what he was doing when he landed on Fabian Schär at Newcastle, have a look at this. He does the exact same thing to Singo, accidentally, on purpose, landing on the central defender. He is, Duran, an enigmatic player. And in the wake of another West Ham United bid for our Colombian, which felt to me like it's just a token show of we're trying to do something to a very frustrated fan base with Danny Ings starting up front right now, but it still feels to me like our two number nines are not going to coexist beyond this summer. And the most likely player to sell is, of course, Duran, because we would get so much more back in return. Any big club would happily pay $20 million a year for 5 straight years if they knew the player they were getting could contribute to 20 goals per season, which I think Duran could if he started at a big club. And if you're Aston Villa, that kind of money, 80 to 100 million, means you can go buy a striker that can play with or instead of Ollie Watkins, plus solve other holes in your squad. You know, a player like that is Jonathan David, who has shown he could play as a 9, and then with Canada, he plays deeper, sort of as a 10 behind Kyle Larin. And the number one big issue that defined Monaco 1, Villa 0, substandard set pieces. The old early goal conceded inside 10 minutes reared its ugly head again, this time from a corner. But before we explore what actually happened on the set piece, we have to look at what led to the corner in the first place. And unfortunately, for the second time in the league phase, it was a Tyrone Mings error that ultimately led to the corner and then the goal. And the reason why it's so hard to dislike Tyrone Mings is that he stood right up afterwards and put his hand in the air. Mings wasn't put in the best position by Dean here, and I thought we could have switched this ball, which was on all day. The weak side of the field was open all game long, but it's not how we play. We play with intricate little passes in congested areas of the field, and in this case, he telegraphed the ball to Tielemans, and it was played too soft. If you're a well-coached and good scouting team, as Monaco were, they read it, pressed at the right time, and boom, now we're defending a corner. Given that we survived 10 corner kicks at Arsenal, they might be the best in the business in Europe from those situations, I felt pretty comfortable that we weren't going to concede from this particular one. Instead, Tyrone Mings, for the first time, does not win an aerial duel on the first contact. Emi Martinez does not tip the ball over the bar or away from the danger area, again, very deep in his goal. And then Boubacar Kamara, tasked with marking Singo, had absolutely no chance at this stage. How many times have I said it's never one error, but a succession of them that lead to goals? So the hosts get a goal from a central defender. Oh, how nice would that be once in a while? But in order for that to happen, you have to have great delivery. And despite the fact that we had 3 more corners than Monaco, 4 of them went straight to the hands of the goalkeeper, which is where Unai Emery was candid once more, saying we were horrible from dead ball situations, at which point I wondered, what is Austin McPhee thinking when he hears the boss use those words. This may just be my perception, but of late, Villa has looked very predictable, static, and unconvincing from set pieces, which includes the first half free kick by Luca Dean. Where has all the innovation gone that we had earlier in the season? The stuff that keeps opponents guessing. Because if we're going to go the Arsenal route and try to box out the goalkeeper in his 6-yard area by crowding it, we need way better delivery than we got from Tielemans, Dean, and Bailey on Tuesday. The Sill Hill Brewery star performer was Ezri Konsa. Konsa must be keenly aware that he's about to have some competition in his position in the squad. Let's hope so anyway. He completed 96% of his passes. That's 65 of 68. He won 4 of 5 ground duels, had 1 big block, and he recovered the ball 6 times. I'm going to toast Ezri with Holy Trinity Ale, which you can only get at the tap room in Aston, where you should go after the West Ham game to meet Kevin Gage. It's another match day meet where Kevin Gage will be answering questions and telling stories. I've got a match day meet for you. Holy Trinity Ale, meet your mouth and stomach. It's the 3rd time already we've faced the Hammers this season. Can we make it a clean sweep? Well, if we do, it'll be without Unai Emery in the technical area. He'll be up in a private suite. Does that mean Paco takes over? That's the first time Emery's been suspended since he's been with Aston Villa, and surely we'll have learned a lot about them during the FA Cup game under Graham Potter, and they are also missing a lot of players as they did then. No strikers, really. Crescencio Somerville added to the list. Jared Bowen back on the grass training but not ready for this game, and now Konstantinos Mavropanos missing due to suspension. West Ham will be fresher than Villa without a midweek game, but 4 days is a pretty decent turnaround. There'll be 2 days of rest, then they'll ramp things up on Friday and Saturday, and if you ask any player what would they prefer, training or playing, they'll say they'd rather play games. Still, though, we've got to freshen things up given that Celtic comes around the following Wednesday. That is not a long turnaround, which makes me wonder whether we're going to see Daniel Malin one way or another, maybe not as a starter, perhaps as a substitute, and could we even see a cameo for young Andres Garcia? Welcome to the club officially, Andres. Good to meet you. Please be as awesome as your highlights. That was a difficult defeat. There's no way of sugarcoating it, and I was frustrated because I understood the implications of what even a point might have meant, and I think that's why Unai Emery looked as miserable as I've seen him after any Villa defeat. And the pressure on Monchi to bring in another central defender now, maybe somebody else before the window closes, is really ramping up because McGinn and Barkley, they're close. Torres is not, and we are a thin squad with many games coming up. Until the weekend, stay awesome. Thank you for watching as always. And of course, up the mighty Villa.